So here's a common question we get all the time here at the store. Are the expensive or really expensive pianos really worth the money compared to a cheap or less expensive acoustic piano? And when you think about it, what people are really asking when they ask that question is, what are the differences between a basic piano and an expensive piano? And so in today's video, that's exactly what we're going to explore. Now, the word value is complicated no matter what product you're buying, and with pianos, it's particularly complicated because people buy pianos for a wide variety of reasons. Sometimes you're buying it because you love the way it looks in your house. Sometimes you buy it because you really like how the brand makes you feel in terms of a new level of status or pride. Sometimes you're a parent and you just want to give something to your child that is going to relight their excitement for learning piano. And then yes, of course, sometimes you buy a piano because of how it feels, sounds, and plays. Now, those first reasons are really messy to kind of break apart and deal with. So we're going to set those aside and just deal with the question of whether the musical potential is worth the money. So here's the first concept that I'd like you to consider, is that tone and playability of a piano is something that you can measure and you can objectively compare. In a sense, that's what we're trying to grapple with here at the channel on virtually all of our videos, is the idea of being able to compare and measure instruments based on their musical output. So many people look at a piano's sound and tone and think, well, it's all just personal opinion. Whether you like one or like another really can't be measured, it can't be gauged, it's completely just an internal preference. And I would agree with that to an extent, but there's a whole bunch about how pianos are built, designed, and sound that actually can be measured and sort of objectively gauged against one another. For example, if we take a look at, say, a Steinway Grand or a Bechstein Grand, everybody is going to agree that these two instruments sound different, but they're both considered really high-end pianos. So what makes these two instruments different but better than the vast majority of other grand pianos, for example, that you're going to see at a quarter or a third the price of these instruments? Well, because even though the character of the tone sounds different, there are fundamental similarities in terms of how that tone is presented and the playability of the piano itself. For one, both of these instruments, or instruments like it, are going to have far better sustain than instruments that are in a lower category. And of course, when we're talking about sustain, it's how long that note is going to ring for once you play the note. And so what's contributing to that? Well, great sustain comes from several things, and it's not magic, and it's definitely not just picking the right piano off the floor. Sustain comes from the fact that you've got even tension right across the entire soundboard, and that tension is going to be produced by the strings being stretched over the bridge and pressing down on the soundboard. It's going to come from the fact that the ribs underneath the soundboard have all been dried evenly, have a similar tension that they're applying to the soundboard, that the wood in the soundboard has a very consistent grain, it's been dried properly, and it's going to resonate fairly similarly in different parts of that soundboard. And then specifically in the case of Bechstein, who's gone down the road of completely re-exploring what it means to build a piano hammer, the hammer itself has a huge impact on the sustain of the piano. It needs to be light, the density of that felt needs to be really consistent, the voicing needs to be great so that it strikes the string with enough force that it really activates the instrument and then gets right off of that string so that there's little distortion and you're not removing any of the energy that you've just put into the string itself. And so even though these two instruments are going to play differently, the tone is going to be different, and yes, you will have some personal preference. You can look at something like sustain and say, well, these are definitely in a different category than an instrument that may be in the $20,000, $30,000, or $40,000 price range. Another aspect of a piano's performance is really how even the tone is from the bottom of the instrument up to the top of the instrument. And the better the instrument, generally speaking, the smoother the transitions between those different character zones is going to be, and the less difference there's going to be between the bass, the tenor, and the treble sections. When you get on a less expensive piano, you start to notice all sorts of differences between the tone of the bass to the tone of the lower tenor, the upper tenor, the treble. It can be all over the place, and not only that, you hit wide differences in the consistency, even from note to note as you're transitioning through the bass up until the treble. These are all things that can be observed, measurable, and are a direct result of the quality of the manufacturing, the quality of the hammer, the quality of the prep at the factory, and that's all, of course, driven by the price point. Another element of pianos, which tends to be greatly affected by price point, is the level of cabinet resonance that the instrument has. The content of the rim has a huge component in terms of the type of color that the rim can add to the overall tone, as well as the level of resonance that the piano is going to have when you are playing it. So as an example, if we take a look at one of Yamaha's more basic models, even though this is a well-made product, the rim is going to be thinner without using nearly the same level of hardwood content. Yamaha, of course, is not the only one in sort of a lower category that's going to do this. You can find that virtually across the board. So once again, a physical aspect that's going to be present on one piano, not present on another piano, producing a very real difference in the tone and the musicality of the piano. Next, and maybe one of the most significant differences between a premium piano and a less expensive piano is the action. And that refers to not just the quality of the components, the sophistication of the design, maybe some extra technology involved, but also who and how long they are spending to prep this at the factory level. Voicing, regulation, putting it through the pounding machine, really going over it with a fine-tooth comb to ensure that this is going to be as consistent, responsive, and smooth as possible. By the time a premium grand piano actually gets to a showroom floor, the action can make a difference of tens of thousands of dollars in the price. Now, what is the impact on the playing experience to have a great action versus a more basic action? Well, it shows up in two places. One is the immediate playing experience itself. We already mentioned consistency, making sure that every key is responding exactly the same as keys adjacent to it, that repetition speed is high, that the weighting is perfect, that the physical touch of the key, both the black and the white keys, achieves the right level of grip that the manufacturer is intending, and then the quality and the character of the hammers itself makes a massive difference to the instrument. And finally, for me, one of the most obvious tonal differences between a premium piano and a basic piano is how clean and clear the tone is. Not just in the bass, because everybody talks about how clear the bass is, but often in the treble as well. Things such as false beating, which is sort of a warble in the tone even when the string has been tuned as perfectly as it can be, is quite common when you get lower quality strings, as well as a less precise scale design and build quality, as well as other really obvious things like certain buzzing that you can't really get rid of, or really harsh distortion, particularly in the top treble, that isn't a function of tuning at all. It could be a function of alignment of hammer to the string, capo pressure bars that aren't level and therefore the strings aren't level, lack of A-graphs even in the middle that can cause a lot of the same issues. Those artifacts are just bound to show up when you're using lower quality materials, spending less time to prepare and build the instrument at the factory, and then generally those brands and suppliers being well aware that likely they're catering to less discerning customers who may not hear some of these imperfections as well as trained musicians. So when you take into account all of those measurable factors, if you can hear and demand that level of musical quality, then in a sense you are absolutely getting what you pay for, particularly if a great musical output is your primary goal in investing in a piano. My name is Stu Harrison. This has been Merriam Pianos on YouTube. Hopefully we'll see you again for some more videos, and have a great day.